Good morning and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast that tees you up for the day ahead in British politics and gets the whole thing done in less than 20 minutes.
My name is Sam Coates of Sky News and with me is Jack Blanchard of Politico. It's Monday, October the 14th and the fire is on, I'm afraid, Jack. It has got to that point in the year. It's suddenly got cold. And so it's probably also because I'm stiff from running the Royal Parks Half Marathon yesterday. But gearing up for a week of rain, it looks like, from the forecast.
There is literally a log burner crackling in the background behind Sam Coates' shoulder in the kitchen. It's an idyllic scene. It is not an idyllic scene in my little study at the top of my house where the rain is hammering down this Monday morning. I cannot wait to get out there and face the week. I'd like to say there's a big week ahead in British politics. It doesn't really feel like that at the moment. The government has not filled up the grid with exciting things, but there is one big thing happening today, Sam, on Monday, and that is the government's International Investment Summit. And we will be talking about that. Lots and lots of the biggest captains of industry are here in town today to talk about investing in the UK, and that will dominate much of today's news and proceedings. We'll also be talking about David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, who's going over to Luxembourg to meet EU foreign ministers. It's the first time Britain's been invited to an EU Foreign Affairs Council for more than 2 years.
I couldn't really see anything on Tuesday that stood out, but on Wednesday you've got the inflation stats for September, and we're going to get the first glimpse of the assisted dying bill in the Commons. Now that inevitably massively controversial piece of legislation will actually be debated on Friday the 29th of November, and there'll be a vote just before Christmas. That is not going to be straightforward. It's not going to be straightforward in terms of a policy, but also it's causing a lot of problems politically. So that'll run and run. And Thursday, we've got the first TV debate in the Tory leadership final round. That's on GB News. Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick at that special event. Robert Jenrick already demanding more TV debates.
That's just what we need, isn't it? More Tory TV debates. So who could disagree with Robert Jenrick? But let's kick off with the investment summit. That is the main thing in the government's news grid this week, or what is left of the government's news grid, which is sort of semi-functioning thing, which has long been in the calendar, this, and the government has brought in really some of the biggest CEOs and industry leaders in the world, to be fair to them. There's an impressive cast lineup, more than something like 300 big senior business people are coming to London today. In fact, many of them were here last night. There's a big reception happening and a series of events happening at the Guildhall in London through the day. There's some sort of party happening at St Paul's Cathedral. Why not, with the King? Most of the cabinet are going to be there, and the idea is that they are showing that Britain is open for business under this new government. And Sam, we're expecting lots of announcements through the course of today of shiny new investments that various businesses are making that are going to bring billions of pounds into the UK, and that's sort of the good news story the government is trying to sell, right?
My colleague Mark Kleinman reporting that I think by the end of the day they should be able to say that they've got £50 billion of new announcements, so announcements about investment in the UK, investment made post July 4th when Labour came into power. And these are going to be all sorts of projects, roughly twice the 28 billion unveiled by previous Conservative administrations. The sort of entire list is being finalised. It could be considerably higher than 50 billion, but we're told that it'll be at least that. And that's one of the big outcomes of today. The other big outcome of today, I think, will be, and this is more meaty in terms of policy, we should get, Mark tells us, I think the FT tells us as well, green paper on industrial strategy. And that will set out some of the government's approach to how it's going to manage business, encourage investment in future. It's going to pick out a number of industries that will be its priority: life sciences, creative industries, green economy, finance as an enabler for other things to happen, professional services like accountants, and interestingly, defence. They're all going to be in there as areas that this government is going to prioritise. Quite how they're going to prioritise them, I think, is remains an interesting question. But those two things this government will hope starts to paint a bit more of the picture of how it wants to manage the economy as we go into the coming weeks and months.
If you're the sort of person that likes to watch international investment summits, you can watch some of this. There's a sort of order of business. We get Peter Kyle, the science secretary. Well, he's actually doing the morning broadcast round, so he'll be popping up on TV and radio everywhere.
That's the coffee machine, I'm afraid.
I can hear the coffee machine.
Getting its complaint in early.
Absolutely, why not? It's that time of day. Just let me tell you, Business Secretary Johnny Reynolds is warming up the crowd. Keir Starmer makes a big speech about 10 o'clock in the morning. And then Keir Starmer does an in-conversation event with the former head of Google, Eric Schmidt, where they will discuss AI. It's full Rishi Sunak, this, isn't it? Eric Schmidt's a bit more of a cuddly figure compared to Elon Musk, but you remember well, Sam, Rishi Sunak when he was Prime Minister doing that weird in-conversation thing with Musk, and this is sort of the Keir Starmer version of it. Google are a bit more Labour friendly, I think, in my mind, than Elon Musk, and so maybe it'll be a bit more straightforward. But I don't know, is Keir Starmer an AI kind of guy? I'm not. It doesn't really feel like very on brand for him. But anyway, that is happening, and then we also get Lisa Nandy speaking. Rachel Reeves is making a speech. And what I love about all of these events at the Guildhall today, Sam, is that you can watch them live streamed on LinkedIn. Of course you can, because this is a business summit, and where else would you be watching it but glued to LinkedIn, where apparently you can live stream things now. So what more message could you want than Britain is open for business under Labour? And Keir Starmer chatting to the head of Google on LinkedIn. It's all happening today.
I'm going to be watching for a couple of things today. And one is exactly what kind of investments the government pull out of the bag at the moment. Because the picture is perhaps quite a lot more complicated than the government is going to want to tell you about today. Because at the moment, yes, I'm sure there will be stuff like there already has been on data centres. Already the ministers have been out and about championing multi-billion pound investment from Amazon and other parts of tech infrastructure. But the truth is, Jack, that there is a problem with some of the investment into the UK at the moment. And it's a problem that some people in part think has been caused by governments, not just Labour. This is the previous Tory administration as well. And it all comes down to Thames Water. And the chilling effect of what's going on with Thames Water is apparently one of the things that's holding back people from sovereign wealth funds and other investors from investing in Britain. And this issue in code is actually at the heart of Keir Starmer's speech. Let me explain what's going on. Over recent weeks, basically global investors have been warning and been alarmed at the way that the regulator Ofwat has approached Thames Water, and that, they say, has caused a chilling effect, which means that they're reluctant to commit further sums to any British infrastructure projects. Not a total ban, but it is making, according to international investors, more nervous about committing the cash. And the problems around Thames Water came to a head last week, where it emerged that Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, which is one of the big players in all of this, actually had to write off its investment in Thames Water because it basically blamed the regulators. It said in its accounts that was due to the challenging regulatory environment and operational performance. And what happened after that is the Global Infrastructure Investor Association, who of course have their own self-interest, but nevertheless represent the kind of investors that we're going to get at today's summit, and so this is a big deal, basically said perceptions continue to be coloured by investors' experience in water where the regulatory environment remains a red flag, and basically calling, if you want any investment, any big investment in British infrastructure, for the government to take on the regulators and make sure that they don't do things that harm the relationship with business and result in more businesses losing their money. And funnily enough, this is exactly what Keir Starmer is talking about. He's talking about it in code, but if you read the kind of preview of Keir Starmer's speech today, it is all about making sure that regulation and the regulatory environment is safe and sensible and appropriate for business. And talking to officials yesterday, they're very clear this is his attempt to intervene in the Thames Water situation. And he's basically saying we are going to look at all the regulators to make sure that they are not making life for business and life for investors too hard. And so that is just a little indication of one of the problems that this government has. If regulators have ended up being consumer champions, probably quite rightly, for electoral reasons, but sometimes that has resulted in bashing companies, rightly or wrongly, and that makes Britain a less attractive place to invest. That is the thing that Keir Starmer is looking to reassure people in that room. But of course, the flip side of the coin is other bits of government, other bits of the Labour Party, the unions are going, hang on a moment, are you actually going to reduce the amount of regulation, make life easier for badly behaving companies that want to invest just because you want this shiny cash? How exactly is that going to work? And I think that dilemma for Keir Starmer's government is at the heart of this summit.
Yeah, and you touch upon something else there, Sam, which is a sort of a bigger and separate dilemma that is completely inherent in this Labour project, which is that Keir Starmer is claiming that it is possible to be pro-business and pro-worker. And traditionally, those two things have not been something that you can be both of at the same time. And we saw only a few days ago, the government published its big workers' rights package, a much heralded workers' rights package. And within the announcements around that package, the DFT, the Department of Transport, put out a press release saying how it was offering new protections for seafarers, and just did a little drive-by shooting on P&O Ferries, the firm which did that massive fire and rehire thing a few years ago, and of course nearly blew this whole summit up. And we saw over the weekend how those that press release and then further comments made by Louise Hay, the Transport Secretary, about P&O Ferries almost caused the owner of P&O Ferries to pull out of the summit, or at least they were threatening to do that, withdraw one of their big investments. There's a big row in the government over the weekend. Louise Hay got slapped down pretty effectively by Keir Starmer. The ministers distanced themselves from her comments. And now the Dubai investment vehicle, which owns P&O Ferries, has come crawling back to the summit and apparently will make its investment after all. Absolutely indicative of the problem and the challenge facing Keir Starmer is, on one hand, and one side of his mouth, he promises to be pro-business, cutting regulation, we want all your money coming in, and at the same time tries to be a government that is bigging up workers' rights and is prepared to attack companies like P&O Ferries. And it is difficult to do both of those things at the same time, and we've seen that over the weekend. And I think, if you're going to try and walk that tightrope, then you need to be a very carefully joined up, coordinated government, which this government so far has very much not been. And it was blatantly obvious that this government that doesn't have a proper grid, that doesn't communicate well, and we've seen that over the first 100 days of it, doesn't let its own ministers know what's going on. Louise Hay had no idea that P&O Ferries, or the owner of P&O Ferries, was coming to this summit and was about to make a big investment, and therefore felt able to make comments about the company just a few days before the summit. And the result is you get 2 or 3 days of sort of chaos headlines instead of all the good news stories that the government wants to tell. And so I think we're going to see this again and again, Sam, during the course of this government, as they try and, as I say, they're trying to be two things at the same time, and it is not an easy thing to do.
I would argue, Jack, this is potentially exactly the same or a similar type of issue the government are going to have when it comes to the budget, because they are trying to tell us two things simultaneously. And this has sort of come across loud and clear over the weekend, last few days to me. On the one hand, the government want to tell us that there is, by changing the borrowing definitions linked to the fiscal rules, as we talked about before, a bit more money to borrow to invest. On the other, the day-to-day spending that this government will have is incredibly tight. Basically, this government is telling everybody there's two types of money. You can have one bit and you can't have the other, which, with the best will in the world, is a confusing message for anybody to swallow. And you've got cabinet ministers just going into their talks with the Treasury and coming out absolutely shocked at the level of cuts that they're having to find in order to pay for public sector pay rises. Whilst Keir Starmer gave interviews over the weekend basically saying some of the sunny uplands are coming because we're going to invest in projects for the long term. Don't worry, it's only short-term pain. Landing that and navigating your way through that, I was told, and we wrote this up on Friday, that while the IFS says there's roughly £25 billion in taxes needed to fill the gap in order for the government to fulfil its promises, I'm told that that's an underestimate. It's likely to be a bigger figure than that. So can you have sunny uplands and sort of, in some places, swinging cuts and really painful tax rises, whether it's, easier politically ones on gambling through to the row over employer national insurance or pension taxes? How can you square that circle? And I think the problem for this government all the way along has been trying to say all things to all people. This budget and this moment is crunch time. It's going to take all the political skills in the world in order to land these messages cleanly.
Yeah, and that budget, of course, now only 2.5 weeks away, and lots of coverage in the papers again today about this idea that the government is going to increase national insurance contributions from employers, not employees. Jonathan Reynolds was on the Sunday shows yesterday, the business secretary, and told your colleague Trevor Phillips that the Labour manifesto pledged, Sam, that national insurance would not be increased, only applied to employees' contributions, like normal people's tax rises did not apply to business contributions. He reckons that's there in black and white in the manifesto. I've had a read of it. It's kind of ambiguous. They will definitely be accused of breaking their promise if they go ahead and do that. They can definitely make the case that wasn't what it meant, but it was hardly clear. And I think that, as you rightly said on the podcast last week, Sam, there will be a heck of a storm if they go ahead and do that, because a tax on business at a time when the economy is struggling is certainly something the Tories will be keen to criticise them for, and there is nobody in government saying that they're not going to do that right now. Should we just talk briefly about the Tories, Sam, because we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I think it's nice to give the Tories 2 minutes at the end, because the leadership contest is in the business stage of the process now. We've got Badenoch and Jenrick going head to head in a debate on Thursday this week. Today they are both heading into CCHQ in the centre of London to do some online leadership hustings with Tory members. Tory members actually start voting in this contest at the back end of this week. The sort of ballot papers are on their way out to however many Tory members are left in the country. I think there's like 100,000 people or something like that voting in this contest. I don't think we've been told the exact number.
There are 170,000 voting in the Rishi Sunak Liz Truss contest, which is the last time we had.
There you go. Even more Tory members than I would have given them credit for. Are they all still here to vote now? I don't know, but it feels to me like a lot of the voting will happen early in the process. That's normally the way these things work, and so I think the coverage of this contest over the next week or two will be critical as to who wins it, and that's probably why Robert Jenrick, who I think is probably seen as a little bit behind Kemi Badenoch in terms of where the members are at, although it's all pretty unclear, is agitating not just to do the TV news debate on GB News that's planned for Thursday, but something on primetime BBC as well. Is he likely to get that? Is Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC, really going to intervene, as Robert Jenrick wants him to do, and demand that these two opposition or would-be opposition leaders go head-to-head on primetime telly?
I can't speak to that, although I'm sure there are lots of broadcasters who will be keen, because why not? This is still a live part of our live political debate. My question, though, Jack, is whether more exposure to Robert Jenrick is actually going to be helpful to Robert Jenrick. And I say that just having looked at former Tory Special Advisor Luke Trill, who runs More in Common. He has done a focus group of both Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. And it appears from the write-up that he's done in The Guardian that he thinks that certainly this group of Tory switchers, which is who he talked to, just seemed more impressed by Kemi Badenoch. She has a no-nonsense approach, seems a bit more normal, according to that group. They were quite willing to forgive her what was seen as outbursts by people who are at Tory conference on maternity. One woman said she's bang on. She's got children herself, so she's obviously had maternity leave. Whereas Robert Jenrick was seen as a bit more of the same. and they were quite critical of his sort of more controversial statements and actions, like painting over the children's mural in a detention centre. They called that stupid and ridiculous. And the comment about SAS soldiers shooting rather than capturing terrorists, one of the participants said that's the kind of thing you say in the cabinet room, you don't make it public. So I just think it's quite interesting as we start to get the first little indicators of how this goes as a head-to-head. The polling had Kemi Badenoch ahead. That focus group does look as if they're slightly more willing to indulge Kemi Badenoch, so we'll see where it goes from there.
And I think the fact that it is Robert Jenrick doing this, publishing letters to Tim Davie saying, get me on the telly, suggests that he thinks he is behind in this contest and his team thinks he's behind in this contest, and that is why he is desperately trying to change the game in these crucial first few days when most people will presumably be voting. Sam, we've done 20 minutes. We had better stop. Enjoy the investment summit. I know you'll be tuning in on LinkedIn along with everyone else listening to this podcast, and we can review it all tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.